Hello, everyone, and very warm welcome to all of you who have gathered here today. Hi, myself, Alina Joseph. I'm the co founder of Asia Pacific Oceania Space Association. And on behalf of our team, I'm really excited and glad that you have joined us today for our very first webinar series happening as a part of our design thinking workshop, Cosmic Sandbox Season 1, Episode 1. Today, we have a very special lecture by Dr. Shirish Ravan from UN Spider, and also we have other couple of things arranged for you, the participants. So, without any delay, we'll go further ahead with the schedule. Before that, I would like to mention that we will be highly appreciating if we could maintain the decorum for the event. So, with that, I will invite my colleague Dr. Sindhu to explain a little bit about the POSA and the activities that we have done so far. Sindhu, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Alina. Hello, everyone, and I'll be quickly sharing my screen for a short, but maybe too much of information presentation. So yeah, so we call ourselves Asia Pacific Oceania Space Association, APOSA in short form. You can just refer as APOSA, that's totally fine. And our vision is to actually foster friendship and collaboration across the Asia Pacific space community. So from where we started is with the Space Generation Advisory Council, APSUOW last year. And what we realized is that there are so many passionate individuals across the region whom we could be friends with and also collaborate to achieve a lot more of things, just like how we have our own team from different places in Asia Pacific, from Indonesia, Thailand, Japan, India. So that was where the vision stemmed out. It is from our own team. And then the milestones, there are two significant milestones that we are really proud of our team. First is that we presented our official statement at 25th session ICC RESAP, which is organized by UNESCO. And then of course, our IAC paper at Dubai. One of our teammate, Chawalwat, he was there at IAC Dubai to present our paper on ASEAN space economy. It is a review of all the space activities in the ASEAN member states, and then collectively as one single region, what exactly is their capabilities and where exactly can they go as a next step. So that was the focus of the IAC paper. Moving on, we have, of course, this flagship event, Cosmic Sandbox, which I'll be explaining further in the next few slides. And then, so our three main goals for APOSA is to develop sustainable space community, provide a simple continuous platform like this. So don't be too formal or don't restrict yourself from asking questions. Just be yourself, be friendly to each other. And that is a platform that we encourage to actually build in the future as well. Just be open to all the different perspectives and keep it simple. Whether you are professional, whether you are just a bachelor's degree, there is no just a bachelor. So that's the whole point. Just be yourself and talk to each other. So that's the goal, to give a platform to individuals like ours and then create interactions and networking. Goal 3 is to actually create and forge a community of problem solvers. And we have our events aligned to each of these strategic goals. So our first is the launching event. We collaborated with SGAC to actually launch this whole event as an initiative in the beginning. And then over the last couple of months, we actually transformed and evolved to become more than just an initiative at this point. So we started off at 26th June officially, and we had participants from all over the Asia Pacific, I would say. And we had our guests from VNSC, Dr. Lee from Jista, Thailand, Mr. Vasanchai, and then from UTokyo, Quentin. So Quentin is also our mentor for APOSA. And we have another mentor, Max, from Japan, UTokyo as well. So moving on, so the second goal, where we are intended to give a simple continuous platform. Clubhouse was at peak that time, the social media platform. So we started a Space Smurfs club on the Clubhouse. right after the launching date. And every week we were conducting, like we were bringing in experts and we were conducting events to actually keep the floor open to anyone to come and ask questions, share their insights, and just have a chat with the expert. So the gap between the experts and the community to be reduced. That was the whole point and intention. And we have covered wide different topics, and we had 14 sessions, and we right now have 390 plus followers on the particular club. And for now, because of Cosmic Sandbox, the sessions are past, but we will soon be resuming it once again. Yeah. So moving on, this is why we are all gathered here today, the Cosmic Sandbox. And this is going to be our flagship event, and it's not just one-off. There is going to be a series of design thinking workshop that's coming up in the 2022 as well. So this is just one of the first of the many, I believe, and we believe. Yeah. So that is about that. So what exactly is a Cosmic Sandbox and design thinking workshop? In case if any of you has not gone through it before, this is just gist of it. So we provide a challenge theme. It will be related to the space-based assets or space industry. And then there will be a set of problems that you will be mining, you will be learning together as a team, as a group, as a community. And then you will prioritize and identify which of these problems are actually, more of an issue in this current times, and like prioritize. And then there will be mentoring sessions, like just like how we have Mr. Shirish today to actually have the conversation. Just go ahead, ask your questions, discuss with the experts. Don't feel restricted. Again, just ask whatever that you have in mind. What are the challenges? Keep mining those problems. That's when you get thinking. That's the whole point of this workshop. And then finally ideate, like what are the solutions to all of these problems? Is there any? Do we have to discover or do we have to create? So these are the different elements of the sandbox that we are trying to bring to you and create together. So moving on, there are, like I said, there are series of workshops coming up. And the first one is this disaster management and risk reduction. There'll be a couple of more in the early 2022, environment assessment, resource monitoring. Once again, it depends on the Earth observation applications. So that is it. That is about the different challenge themes. We have, obviously you all would have already gone through this like a million times in all the social media. So these are the 5 speakers covering 5 different perspectives, and make use of these sessions, I would say, because this is like, all of these people are really great. We had our interactions with them. There is no judgment. There is no nothing. Just go ahead, talk with them. If you have questions, just ask them. So that's the only thing I would really recommend. And yeah, moving on, we also have our APRSAF session coming up in December 1st, and it's on Earth observation for climate change. We have 3 amazing speakers for that as well, as our panelists from Australia, Japan, and India. Yeah. So with that, I conclude. If you think, if you resonate with our ideas, if you resonate with our vision, what we are doing, just feel free to drop any of us a message. Rungu here, Pooja here, Alina here, yeah, any of us a message, or just there is Aposa LinkedIn page. There is Space Smurfs on Clubhouse. Literally, we are everywhere. Just drop us a message and join us to, we can work on it. Yeah. So with that, I'll give it over to you, Alina. Yeah, I'll stop sharing the screen.
Thank you so much, Sindhu, for that comprehensive idea about what Aposa is doing and what is Aposa to begin with. So I'm really glad to be part of that team. And up next, we have I should give a little introduction to this. So like a couple of weeks before, I contacted Ms. Jovita here. So she is an illustrator who has been working in this industry for quite some time, and she has been illustrated 7 comic books and also in some of the films as well. And I contacted her asking, okay, are you interested in creating a logo for us? And she was like, wow, whatever you do right now is so interesting, and I would be really happy to be a part of it. So that's when we decided, okay, let's have a logo for Cosmic Sandbox. And today we have Jovita here herself, and she will be revealing our Cosmic Sandbox logo for season 1, episode 1. So Jovita, the floor is all yours. And I'm really happy to invite you to this wonderful meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Alina. Such a pleasure to join the team, this wonderful session. So myself, Anna Jovita, and I'm a freelance illustrator. I've been doing freelance artworks for about 5 or more years. And I'm currently based in Alapi in Kerala. So yeah, the logo reveal. So before that, I'll just explain something about the logo, how the team approached and everything. And it was such an absolute pleasure to have worked with this team because they were very supportive, such a very wonderful team. They have given me enough creative support and all the time and space to work on the logo. So yeah, so the requirements, from the team was like, it's a community that is diverse, and it's an inclusive space where, they build all the solutions as a single community, irrespective of gender, disabilities and race. So this was a basic idea about the logo creation. So nothing complicated in the logo. I hope the logo reflects all these elements. So I think, yeah, without further explanation, I'll reveal the logo. So I'll be sharing the screen now. I hope. Yeah. Okay. I hope the screen is visible to you.
Yes, your screen is visible. Yeah. Perfect.
Yay. So this was the basic idea. I hope it's much clear in the logo itself without much explaining much about it. I hope it's clear. Yeah.
Thank you, Jovita. I mean, it was such a pleasure working with you and like getting our ideas expressed in a way that, in some way, like logo is much, I mean, it's happier to see it in like logo as such. And yeah, we are really excited that you actually did this for us. And yeah, thank you, Jovita, for being with us today and also for doing the biggest part for biggest job for our Cosmic Sandbox. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me. I'm very happy to join this session. Yeah.
Great. Jim, you have your hands raised. Do you have any question? Okay, please go ahead.
Thank you for allowing me to ask a question. Jovita, could you explain the letter in the logo?
The letter? Okay, should I share the screen one second? Okay, I'll share the screen.
Yes, please.
Yeah. So this one is, it's irrespective of disabilities. We just explained that. So that's why that particular character there, and irrespective of gender. So that's a girl, obviously. And it's all about innovating and it's a teamwork. So that's why I kind of, put them all together inside a space like that, and that blue color, that blue area sort of thing. So, and the letter, I mean, can you?
Cosmic Sandbox, which I can.
Okay. Yeah.
Maybe I can also take this question. Yeah, go ahead. Alina, do you want it? Yeah.
No.
Yeah. Yeah, so I will take it. So the sandbox, right? The word sandbox means that you have this space where you can experiment with without the fear of failure. So that is where the sandbox comes in. I learned about this word from a Korean drama, but the word stands, you can Google it, the word stands for this meaning where you can actually play without or create without the fear. So that is the basic idea of this word sandbox. Cosmic represents the space industry. There is no much zing to it. Like, it's just the flair for the idea of space industry. And this particular font style is because it's a creative space, so it should be looking like a freestyle, comical and everything. Yeah, so that's why this particular font and this particular word. And yeah, I hope I answered your question, Jim. And yeah, let's take the questions at the end and we will move on with the next agenda. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much, Jovita, for sharing your insights, and thank you for Jim for raising the question. Okay, so now let's move on to the our next schedule and the main event, main session of the event. We have Dr. Shirish Ravan from UN Spider uh, to deliver his featured session. So, Dr. Shirish, I would like to invite you for your session. And Dr. Shirish works for the United Nations Office for Outer Space Affairs in Vienna, Austria, and he coordinates the activities of the United Nations Platform for Space-Based Information for Disaster Management and Emergency Response, UN SPIDER, primarily in the Asia and Pacific. He is also involved in diverse initiatives of the office, such as Space for Sustainable Development Goals, Space for Health, International Asteroid Warning Network, and so on. And his previous assignments at the United Nations include heading the illicit crop monitoring program of the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime in Afghanistan. He has also extensively worked with the countries in Asia, the Pacific, Africa, and all to offer technical advisory services and the capacity to use space-based technologies for strengthening disaster and climate resilience. Dr. Shirish, we are really excited to have you on board today, and we are looking forward to your session.
Thank you. So you hear me well?
Yes. Yep.
Good. Thank you. So as I understand from your introduction, this is the first workshop in the series of your Cosmic Sandbox, right?
Exactly. Yes.
Good. And I also see the participants are limited, but small groups means better interaction.
Yes.
Exactly. But I would just like to know who are the participants mainly? Are they more students or young professionals, or so that I can adjust my language accordingly?
It is actually, most of them are young professionals, but their qualification vary from bachelor's to PhD. There is a good mix of all the backgrounds, qualification, and but yeah, it's safe to, I guess, assume young professionals or early career.
Okay. Right. I'm trying to remove the virtual background. It is not so good. Okay. Okay, good. Yeah, it is early morning in Vienna. So good morning from my side. So let's keep it very interactive. And I'm very happy to see a young group of professionals who have launched this concept of APOSA. And I hope your journey starting well and you will go a long way. I remember something about 95, 96 back in those days. Two young boys came to my office, and of course I was also very young at that time. I was had just finished my PhD from Indian Space Research Organization from the Dehradun campus, Indian Institute of Remote Sensing. And two boys came to me and they say, we are launching something called GIS at the Red Development, and we are launching a small magazine. And can you write something for us? So I wrote a 2-page paper for them on tigers conservation in India, how GIS helps. And it was simple 2-page first magazine. I was guest editor of that, and two young boys were doing that. Today that is called Geospatial World. And on the platform of Geospatial World, where Sanjay Kumar is leading that. That was one boy, and another was Ravi Gupta. He's leading another initiative now that's called IT for Development. And they are now international platforms, and the top leaders of the world, including Jack Dengermond of ESRI, founder of ESRI, he's always there on the programs of Geospatial World. So good. Always we start small and make it big. I have seen these success stories. And I was also reading a book from My Dreams from My Father by Obama. And when he organized his first community program, he thought some 500-600 people will come. There were only 10 people. And then he became president after next 15 years of his work. So let's start your journey with great enthusiasm. I see potential in you, and that's why I decided that, okay, I can be on this platform and share my thoughts. So I will not take more time in on the general discussion. Let's go into the topic and open it for discussion. So for participants, just feel free to discuss things openly. I will just try to set context, and then let us keep it more open based on your interest. Good. So let me share the screen.
Yeah, sure, absolutely.
Looks good.
Yes, it's perfect.
Okay. So I'm talking of this because first topic you chosen in this series is space for disaster risk management. I just added something little more, space for building climate and disaster resilience. The reason for this title is also that we have to move away from disaster management to building disaster resilience. So although disaster management is a very general word, when you interact with professionals, there are now methodologies and terminologies that are standardized, and people have realized that instead of managing disaster, one should manage a risk and one should build the disaster resilience, and that makes more sense. And now COP26 is going on in Glasgow. Everyone knows. You are reading the news every day about climate change and what world leaders are doing there. So climate and disasters, they have such a strong correlation today. So as we go ahead, I will explain what I mean by climate and disaster resilience and what space is doing for in this particular area. So just a little bit introduction, because you should always know who is speaking to you. My office is called United Nations Office for Outer Space Affairs. As you know that United Nations is a kind of ocean, so many institutions, more than 50 organizations, specialized agencies, and we belong to United Nations Secretariat, which is in New York, but our headquarters is in Vienna. You can see this building here. This is United Nations office. I'm just showing only part of 2 towers. We have 5 towers and some 5,000 people walking every day and go out, including the visitors that come for our different committee meetings. And we have International Atomic Agency, United Nations Office for Drugs and Crime, United Nations Office for Outer Space Affairs, United Nations Industrial Development Organization, and CTPTO. All these are headquartered here in Vienna. And we operate from Vienna, but of course we are part of UN Secretariat from New York. So that's where in General Assembly, all the matters, they go there for final approval before we implement. So this is the only office of United Nations that is dedicated for promoting, peaceful uses of outer space or dealing with the space technology or space governance. So all other offices, there are a lot of big offices like United Nations Development Program or UNEP or UNICEF, many, they are quite a big in compared to us, and they have a bigger job of taking care of Earth. We are small, but we also have quite a big job of taking care of space, and space is now, increasing its importance in human life. You can't imagine your life without space today. A decade ago, we didn't talk much about space, other than knowing the weather report that you see in television. But today, everything depends on space. Your telephone, your navigation systems, your monitoring disasters, life-saving, rescue operations. So many things today depends on space. You can't imagine life without space, and therefore space has become one of the most critical infrastructure, and we are there to bring benefits of space to humankind, and promote international cooperation in the peaceful uses of outer space to achieve Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs. All of you know that 17 Sustainable Development Goals. Now, for that, we have a number of initiatives and, of course, different sections. So I'm just talking of sections now, initiatives here. This might be of quite good interest to you. Space for Women, very significant initiative of our office. It contributes to Sustainable Development Goal that talks about gender equality or gender parity. And I'm also happy to see that in this particular association that you are leading, APOSA, I see young enthusiastic women who are leading this. So at some point, I would say that you must try to connect with this particular program, Space for Women, contribute, attend its webinars or conferences that we have. There are a lot of experts they are on board, and they are doing a wonderful job in their own countries under Space for Women program. So there is a website called Space for as a digit, spaceforwomen.org, and that's what, or you can Google and you can find this particular initiative. There's also another initiative, Space for Youth, and so all young persons who would like to really contribute to space, and they can become part of our programs. We announce time to time some kind of competitions, and the winners of those competitions we sponsor to International Astronautical Congress, which happened in Dubai. And I think Sindhu was mentioning that one of their team member was there in Dubai to present paper as well. So we also take winners of our Space for Youth competition to those, but there are many other things we do under Space for Youth program. We also publish the success stories, and one of the success story has been from one of my intern from Chennai. His name is Susinder. He has a very successful startup which has grown quickly within last 5 years so much. So I have seen as an intern to very successful businessman who is offering space-based solutions in the navigation areas to mainly to aerospace sector, or basically working with a lot of airport authorities, and his story is also published there. So just giving you some glimpses, access to space for all is the initiative that we have, where some of you might like to do some kind of experiments, microgravity experiments, or you would like to send some experiment that you have designed and you want to send it to the space, International Space Station, or there's also Chinese space station coming up. So we have cooperation with all those entities, and you can actually get in touch with us. Time to time we announce those opportunities. These opportunities also include probably getting an experience of being an astronaut. That will also come as more and more private companies are launching space shuttles, and space journeys happening now. And we are also in collaboration with those kind of initiatives where we can offer such chances to developing countries, persons from developing countries. Space law for new actor is also very important initiative, because right now you see a lot of countries are trying to be part of space technology. They are space emerging countries, and many countries, like a great example from India, now they are transforming the way they dealt with space so far. It was mainly a government affair years ago, but now you see they want to promote private participation, and that has been a model now worldwide in many countries, which has been very successful. And now many countries are migrating, like Indonesia and India itself is a great example that currently they are transforming their space sector and taking a lot of private actors on board. Many countries want to venture into space technologies, and this is where they would like to have advisory on space law and space policies, and that's what we offer through our programs. We have UN Spider program. I will explain it later. This is about disaster management and emergency response, and many other initiatives like space economy. We are also secretary of International Committee on Global Navigation Satellite System. So this is the topmost apex committee in the areas of global navigation satellite system that deals with international cooperation. So only 6 providers of GNSS in the world, but the benefits go to each and every person in all the corners of the world. So that's the work of this committee. We have Space for Water portal, and then of course we are dealing with pandemic. During pandemic, you have seen health is very important aspects. We have Space for Health working groups. and we have Space for Climate Action as a new initiative. So there's a lot happening in the areas of space technology, and we are trying to be facilitator in each of those. But let's stick to more on disaster or building resilience. And as I mentioned that in Glasgow, world leaders, they were there last week, and now their representatives are there, and they're discussing how to deal with climate change. And then the statistics reveal really, this is the statistics 20 years before 2000 and 20 years after 2000. So what happened in this millennia, you can see that number of disasters are much high, although the number of deaths are under control because of good early warning, but number of incidents happening of disaster are very high, and economic losses are also very, very high. As you develop more, you lose more if you are not resilient. So disaster impact is increasing, and the reason for that is obvious. You can see here, floods have increased multiple times, storms increased multiple times. Now, this is a clear evidence that shows that disasters are arising from climate extremes and have increased significantly. And in August, first week, there was a report released called AR6 Climate Change 2021, the physical science basis. It's a complete science report that's also called as a code red for humanity. And followed by that, currently COP26 is going on, which is uniting the world to tackle climate change. And world leaders have made a lot of pledges. So although there is a lot of criticism, we also see a lot of actions are happening. Now, why this is happening? Until 10 years back, probably, world did not give so much attention to it, because when disasters were happening, they were happening mainly in poorer countries or developing world. Okay, somebody speaking.
Pero no está ahora, yo te llamé hace 2 horas.
Hello.
Sorry.
Can you mute someone speaking here?
Yeah.
It disturbs. Okay, thank you. But recently, if you look at what happened this year, couple of months ago, if just bring 3 to 4 months of incidents, you will understand that in Canada there was heat wave, and that has killed, I think, around 200 people or something like that. Recently, New York, floods in New York killed 40 persons. Germany, West Germany, the floods have created havoc, and it created so much junk that they have cleared that junk, and they estimated some thousands of tons of junk they have collected, which is a bad impact of disaster. They say normally that much solid waste or junk should be generated in next 40 years in that area. So that much junk was generated just with one flood in West Germany. So imagine the impact and cost of the disaster, economic losses. And when this kind of disasters are hitting developed countries, which are supposed to be very resilient, their developments are strong, resilient, and then they have fantastic early warning systems and rescue mechanism. Despite all that, if number of people dying there and economic losses there are happening more than a developing world today. And that's where people got really alert. Now, climate extremes are not only affecting the countries that are at a disadvantage economically, but it's hitting even more to the countries that are supposed to be one of the best governed or developed world. And I think that is probably causing a lot of attention now from world leaders at COP26, that, okay, they should do something. It's very serious. And now truly people think climate extremes or climate change is linked so much to disasters. Previously, we also saw that there were isolation between disaster management community and climate change community. They were not so much together. But now we almost see there is a cohesion of these two, and that's what that's why I brought this topic to discuss climate change and disaster management in together in conjunction. Now, we can use a satellite so much for tackling climate change. So literally, we can unlock the power of satellites to deal with climate change for its mitigation or responses. So we have an initiative called Space for Climate Action. So under this initiative, basically, we are trying to realize full potential of space technology in addressing climate change, which is not totally realized as of now. We know that everyone knows, as the science says, there are lots of essential climatic variables. Out of that, probably 65% of climatic variables that are used for understanding the climate change, they can be studied using the satellite, the information that is obtained from satellite today. And as the space technology advancing every day, there is more and more that satellites can reveal to understand the climate change, or planning the actions to deal with the climate change. So space is becoming more important. So, but then we really need great platforms. We are trying to promote and strengthen these capacity building programs, and planning advisory actions to developing countries, how they can use space for dealing with climate change. It facilitates multi-stakeholder collaboration and also promote use of space for climate action. So there is also something called Space Climate Observatory based in Paris now. This is also we are supporting. There are lots of supporting actors for this, including many United Nations agencies and many space agencies. But this is one good initiative where actually the repository of space data is being created and make it available for those who don't have access to satellites of their own. So these are some of the things we are doing through Space for Climate Action. And another initiative is United Nations platform for space-based information for disaster management and emergency response. Acronym is very attractive, UN SPIDER. And under this particular program, we ensure that all countries have access and develop capacity to use all types of space-based information to support full cycle of disaster management. This is a typical disaster management cycle which is accepted now worldwide. So there is preparedness, and then disasters keep happening. Then there's a response phase. After response, there's a recovery phase. And then, of course, prevention and mitigation. And again, you have to prepare for upcoming hazards. If it converts into disaster, again, there is a disaster. So that's how the typical disaster management cycle functions. And UN SPIDER realized that at every phase here, there is a great potential of geospatial information, and satellite images, earth observation, and space technology is one of the great source of geospatial information. So geospatial information at preparedness can be used for early warning, or during the response. It is very useful in rapid mapping or understanding the extent of disaster or impact of disaster. Like right now, Chennai is flooding. So the best source of information, how much is it underwater, how many houses are submerged, and all that, one can understand quickly from satellite images of pre and post disaster. In recovery, one can use satellite images in post disaster need assessment, damage and loss assessment, and build back better. In prevention and mitigation, it has much larger use. And that's where I'm going to introduce you something called Sendai framework for disaster risk reduction. So basically, one has to understand the risks that you live with. So understanding hazard, exposure, vulnerability, and by the way, and then understand the risks. That is one of the priority of Sendai framework for disaster risk reduction. And if you know what hazards are near to you, how much is the exposure, how vulnerable is your place or community for disasters, then only you can plan better and prepare better, and you can also make a good disaster management strategy. That's why I always highlight this particular area. This is a common thing that every country, every region, every state, every district, and every community should do. They should know what risks they are living with. And that's how we can start building the resilience to those particular potential risks. Now, taking dive into international frameworks, where these particular things is captured and how it is helping the governments to prepare their plan, their strategies, their fund allocation. So there are two important things. One is sustainable development goals, which are 17 sustainable development goals. And one of the goal that is directly relevant for disaster management is sustainable development goal 11, that talks about making cities safe, resilient, and sustainable. But it's not just cities, but it's also about communities. That means all the human communities, how to make them safe and resilient. And also there is another sustainable climate action goal, sustainable development goal 13, that's currently being discussed in Glasgow in COP26. Another important framework is called Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction, and this also has been agreed by almost 193 countries during the third World Conference on Disaster Risk Reduction, which happened in Sendai, where there was an earthquake in 2011, earthquake and followed by tsunami. So that was the place called Sendai in Japan, and that's where all the countries gathered in 2015, and they endorsed this particular Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction, which has 5 priorities, and these priorities are basically followed by all the countries in the world today to plan their disaster management strategies, their disaster management contingency plans, preparedness, and drive all the actions related to disaster management and building resilience, basically. So priority 1 is about understanding disaster risks. So know what disaster or risks you live with. Strengthen disaster risk governance. That means have a proper governance structure at all levels. And then priority 3 about investing in disaster risk reduction. So you need basically investment in all the sectors, public, private investments in economic, social, health, and cultural resilience. So, and priority 4, which is last priority, it's about enhancing disaster preparedness for effective response and build back better. So now you can see it covers entire phase of disaster management, right from knowing the risks that you live with. It gives an elements for how you bring that into governance at all levels, and what are the investment necessary to how you prepare for immediate effective response and also build back better. So if disaster happens, how you can build that area better so that it becomes more resilient. So what it is talking about, there's a big change in the way disaster was seen. So previously people looked more into disaster management. Now they see risk management, not disaster management, and also building resilience. This is the new word that came into existence. And elements of Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction, they are also taken into consideration in a lot of sustainable development goals. But one major one is a sustainable development goal, 11. So now these frameworks, they're not just guidelines. They are targets and they are indicators. And all the countries, whether it is sustainable development goal or whether it's Sendai framework, all the countries have to report on international platform on periodical basis every year about what they have achieved under each priority. So there are indicators. There are 7 global targets for Sendai framework, and there are maybe 37 indicators. Sustainable development goals also have 256 targets, and then I think more than that indicators, and those indicators are based on statistics. It needs information of not just what is happening now, but what happened before 10 years before 2015 and what happened after 2015. So 2015 is kind of baseline, and then one has to see, okay, what was the situation before and what is achievement now. It needs a huge amount of data to understand even creating the baseline, and then only one can say, okay, in say 2015 or before 2015, number of people affected by flood or drought or cyclone were this many, or economic losses were something these, but after 2015 the losses are decreased. So there are quantitative targets, and this is what, when we think of these targets, how to report these targets, you need information. Just excuse me for 1 minute. I need to get the water to drink.
Sure, sure.
Good. So when we talk of information that is needed for such an important things, we can rely on Earth observation. Of course, governments and different departments and organizations, they have a lot of data collected through their normal mechanism. That data might be statistical or demographic, whatever it is, coming through the different government records. But what we need also is an evidence-based information, and also a lot of data available in other forms is not synthesized well, not organized well, it's not systematic, it is not cohesive. So there are a lot of challenges of the past data, although many countries have streamlined their statistical departments, like India has National Informatics Center, which has really streamlined all the databases very well. But it's not the case with all the countries in the, even majority countries in the world. But we have archives of Earth observation for last 50 years, which is giving a knowledge of Earth systems, atmosphere, land, ocean, ice coverage. Remember, Landsat, first Landsat was launched in 1972, and now the Landsat 9 is launched in 2021. 50 years of Landsat data is available as a free archive. People can request that. So data is open source, and you can really dig back in the history and understand the disasters that happened in the past and how much area was affected and now what is the situation. You can really, it's a wealth of information available, more than 50 years, over 50 years now. And if we can use that information to supplement the data, that current data is available for such purposes, whether to understand climate change or to understand how to build disaster resilience. So Earth observation can fill in a gap where data is lacking. And another advantage is it's evidence-based information. It's not tampered by anyone. So it's a really good, honest data. And if one can have such information available, with all that information, one can make very good strategies that can drive the initiatives for disaster risk reduction or building disaster management or dealing with the climate change also. So that's the importance of space technology. There's a lot I can say, but we can go on the question and answer sessions and understand a little more about that, how these satellites can also help you understand what you don't see by your own eyes or you don't feel it there, but those risks can be captured by satellite because of the advanced analysis it can information it can provide. We'll talk a little later about it. But not all the countries in the world have actually, kind of access to satellite images. So there are a lot of international mechanisms like International Charter Space and Major Disaster, Copernicus Emergency Management System, Central Asia, which itself is an initiative coming out of APRSAP, which Sindhu explained in the beginning about APRSAP. So these kind of mechanisms are helping all the countries basically to provide satellite images during the disaster, supporting emergency response, and we are part of those, either conceiving such kind of mechanisms or supporting these kind of mechanisms all the time. Dealing with climate change today, if you look, go to BBC app today, and if you look, one of the news says 7 ways to deal with climate change. So there are 7 ways, and out of 7 ways, one of the way it is mentioned is make it green, plant more trees. It means also conserve the trees, basically conserve the green on the earth. And this is where we recently published a very I would say interesting publication. It's in the World Heritage, it's a World Heritage review published by UNESCO. And this issue, review number 90, talks about monitoring World Heritage from space. And we have article here, quite comprehensive, on traveling through space and time, remote sensing of World Heritage sites. So you can look this on the UNESCO website. What we are talking here is, if you can use the space technology or Earth observation to understand World Heritage sites are necessarily forests. If you understand extent of the forest ecosystem composition, its biodiversity, it's a dynamic function, like how much carbon dioxide it captures from the weather. So because one of the 7 way I was mentioning is also capture the carbon dioxide in the ocean, that is in the air right now. And one of the most important machinery to sequester that carbon is the, again, forest ecosystem. Of course, ocean also sequesters the CO2, but we can't do anything with ocean much now. But we can do a lot of green on the earth, and you can really contribute to sequestration of carbon dioxide. And that's what all you can understand from Earth observation. You can understand the whether ecosystems are disturbed or they are natural, and how are the habitats for the wild animals, and all sort of things you can study, and then you can take actions in conserving it well. And this is the one of the greatest way of really boosting the potential of these particular ecosystems to deal with the climate change. And these areas are called ecosystem based disaster risk reduction and ecosystem based adaptation. So this is more talking about disaster risk reduction, and the adaptation is more talking of climate related adaptation, and this contributes to climate resilience. So this is the message we are giving through this particular publication. Uh, Also, it is important for everyone to understand that food is an important thing. Uh, you know, the way food is now cultivated, produced, processed, consumed, and even wasted makes us worry. It's so unsustainable. Today only I was reading news about Vietnam, which is called probably this Mekong Delta, which is called rice bowl of the world. Basically, they contribute so much to methane emission, and that contributes to again global warming. And they would like to reduce that through certain techniques. How to? So the way we are producing food is really problematic today. It contributes to global warming. It is impacting the ecosystems. We are losing biodiversity. And we are only eating limited varieties. Billions of people on earth, when you go to supermarket or vegetable market, you have only 20 varieties to buy, or only 5 grains that you eat probably. So, and although we have billions of species on the earth that are edible and provide better nutrition. So United Nations launched something called Food System Summit, to which my office, along with few more organizations, propose initiative called Indigenous Knowledge Research Infrastructure. So we would like to capture indigenous knowledge that exists in small pockets in the remote areas of the world, all over the world, get that knowledge out, because that is where the real good, nutritious food, the way they cultivate, way they conserve, and the varieties that we are losing, and thereby we're losing a lot of nutrition that needs to be captured, conserved, promoted, and brought back into the mainstream of the food production system. And therefore we have now submitted, and this publication will come in 2022. This is called Global Assessment Report. This is one of the topmost disaster risk reduction publication by United Nations Office for Disaster Risk Reduction, called Global Assessment Report. Every 3 years they publish this. A very significant publication that makes big impact in the world, the way they look at the disaster management. So our chapter is coming on this. It's called Integrating Indigenous Knowledge and State of Art Earth Observation Solutions for Sendai Framework Implementation. So we are talking of how indigenous knowledge can help in disaster risk reduction, and of course how earth observation can help in that, and that is contributing to this significant initiative called Food System Summit, which was launched on 23rd of September. And this is a bit different than Climate Summit. Climate Summit is more looking at the conclusion and some kind of resolution, whereas Food System Summit is a more open. It just opens up, and the initiative will go on, and people can keep contributing to. So this is more of open initiative, and a lot can be contributed into this also using earth observation or satellite the space technologies, I would say. Another topic I would like to touch, the pandemic. I mean, I don't think there is anyone whose life has not been impacted by pandemic. I have lost 4 of my very close friends with whom I used to interact almost on daily basis last 25 years. And suddenly one morning we see they got COVID, and another week they say, oh, I'm in ICU, but don't worry, I will come back. And after 1 week, I get a news that they are no more. And I think that has been experienced for everyone across the world, not only in India or anywhere. And this pandemic has touched life badly to us. Of course, it has given some big opportunities, but those could come at a very, very high cost. We have something called Space for Health Working Group that looks into how space contributes to global health. So Space for Global Health is a working group, which is also part of our Committee for Peaceful Use of Outer Space. And recently, about a year ago, I was part of the program organized by International Space University, And we discussed about how space assets can support global health. And that's where we talked about COVID-19, how it is helping, how it should help, and what lessons learned. And everybody probably remembers that before this particular pandemic, COVID-19 pandemic that we are experiencing, 100 years ago, more than 100 years ago, into probably 1918, there was a pandemic called Spanish flu. And no one of this generation knew about that particular pandemic until COVID-19 pandemic hits us. And then it appeared in the news, oh, 100 years back, there was a pandemic. So people forget everything. The lessons that were learned during Spanish flu, which killed 50 million people, that's what estimate says, we forgot everything. And over 100 years, we forgot that pandemic can ever come to us until it hit us. So lessons learned were forgotten. In 1918, probably we did not have space information. There was no GIS, there was no internet, there was no social media. Today we have everything, and we are even talking about the machine learning, artificial intelligence, and big data, and so many things we are talking today. But the situation is same. Probably world suffered a lot in Spanish flu pandemic, and we are suffering a lot in COVID-19 pandemic. That means even we are technologically so much advanced, we are still, all humanity is on its knee and suffering from COVID-19 pandemic. So what we are trying to see here, we published recently an article in Nature, and it talks about, can space-based technologies help manage and prevent pandemics? We should now document this. We should not repeat losing the lessons that we lost during Spanish pandemic. So our article, you can just freely download, and you can see what space can really give you. So you know that astronauts go to space and they have biomonitor suits. So it measures the temperature, oxygen level, your pulse and blood pressure, and so many things. And those suits can be linked directly to the server, and you can get the live information. So for health workers, those suits can be modified so that we don't lose so many health workers and those kind of things. So these technologies that were developed for space can come handy during this kind of pandemics. Although this pandemic we could not do, but that can be one lesson. We are talking of teleepidemiology, which is a very famous application of space technologies. We have virtual care. Those who cannot really go to the different places, expertise can be offered virtually. A lot of space spin-offs can help giving the products that are developed for space, but can be useful very much for common during the global health, taking care of global health, supporting One Health approaches, or mental health. Astronauts, when they go on 6 months, they stay in small capsule, such a little room. They have to also deal with a lot of mental health issues, and we are also experiencing mental health due to pandemic situation. People are having a lot of nervous problems. We're currently psychological problems, and lessons that are drawn from space can be easily plowed into how one can deal with pandemic. So we are suggesting to introduce a mechanism with space technologies which will assist in such pandemic. And there are a number of recommendations that we have done, how we can introduce space isolation of the physical distancing, or supply chains, planning vaccine, or monitoring prevention of pandemic through satellite modeling based on the satellite images, transmission, assessing pandemic risk factors, and so on. So a lot can be done. And the last part, and after that I will conclude, is about threats coming from space. Not just disasters like drought, earthquakes, or tsunami also, but some threats can also come from space. Near Earth objects. There are lots of asteroids, and some asteroid might hit us, small or big, and it can cause big trouble. And if you recollect how dinosaurs disappeared from this Earth, which was 5th extension of Earth. Earth has gone extinct 5 times, and the 5th extension where dinosaurs disappeared is because of asteroid impact. Now we cannot deal with that because dinosaurs did not have the space technology, but we have the space technology. So there is a mechanism called International Asteroid Warning Network, which our office is secretariat for International Asteroid Warning Network. And there's also a community called Planetary Defense Community. They organize once in 2 years, they organize the Planetary Defense Conference. And there, all the experts from the world, they gather who are basically monitoring these asteroids. Asteroids are today named, their trajectory is tracked. A lot of modeling is being done using satellites from different countries, and not just satellites, but also the ground-based observatory like telescopes and all that infrastructure is being used. And this community now exchanging data and tracking the trajectory of asteroids. And if any asteroid is coming to Earth and going to hit Earth, they will know 10 years before, 5 years before, at least years before something can be predicted. It is highly changeable, but then what is the real situation? What needs to be done for making it more accurate prediction of this trajectory? So those things are discussed in these and acted upon. So we planned a scenario exercise in this planetary conference in May of this year. And we see if at all asteroid strikes Earth, what disaster managers can do, because they deal with drought, floods, and all sort of things. But if such kind of thing is happening, how they will do? Now, this publication we are submitting to now already is ready, and it will appear in Journal of Disaster Risk Science, International Journal of Disaster Risk Science. And it is talking about if, and it helps how one can really deal with it. So entire scenario was discussed, and the lessons learned are something like we need better early warning, advanced planning exercise need to be done. Risk communication is important. New governance is required for dealing with such. So there are a lot of elements we are giving in this particular paper about how to deal with the threat coming from disaster, the space near Earth objects. So important is we should learn to stay safe. It is an instinct that even the smallest creature have, and we are human. We are, instead of staying safe, we are creating condition that is unsafe for us by spoiling our climate, by making a new development which is not disaster resilient. And that's why we have to have knowledge. We have to get knowledge from this space technology, so that we can again learn what everyone knows other than human being, how to learn safe. So we have to learn lesson hard way, although it is a natural instinct. So that's what I wanted to convey in this all message, and that ends my formal presentation. And whatever time permits, we can have some discussion. Okay, so
Thank you, Shirish, for that very amazing presentation. And right now, I'm really sorry. Did I cut you off? You were going to say something, Dr. Shirish?
pardon?
You were going to say something. Did I cut you off?
No,
Okay.
nothing. I can just give suggestion. I know that my presentation was a little longer than what we thought, but some of the questions that probably you wanted to discuss with, I have answered it already. So we can cut down on that, and we can open it more for the participants, and let's see if there are something that the participants would like to discuss and understand. So that we can manage everything well within time.
Yeah, that sounds good. Like Dr. Shirish mentioned, I am right now opening up the floor for the participants to interact with Dr. Shirish, to ask them questions or any other discussion points that you would like to raise. So you can raise your hands, and we will call you up one by one, so that it will not be affecting anything else. So,
Yeah, let's make it participatory. Let's listen from participants. It should not be just that. It need not be a question. You can just have your own experience, your own suggestion and story. Let's just keep it open. So, floor is yours, participants and organizers.
Thank you, Dr. Shirish. That was really wonderful. The content was amazing. And yeah, like the organizers and speaker are saying, I have already set the settings to, you can just unmute yourself and talk. So don't wait for us to call upon, just unmute and feel free to join us for the discussion. Yeah. So maybe I'll just start off with, Alina, we can just start off with 1 or 2 questions. And then, gradually when people join in for talking, and yeah, we can include, yeah.
Yeah. So I have a couple of questions actually. So starting with Dr. Shirish, I mean, the presentation almost covered like the wide spectrum of things that disasters and the disaster management, like how the space comes into action in this, all these things and everything. So with the current pandemic happening, along with the cyclones and everything, floods and other disasters in different parts of the world, like how do you think that? How prepared do you think that we are for a multi-hazard situation? Like how prepared are the countries? Like let's say let's like on taking like different state actors as such, or even like at the community level or the local level. Like how prepared do you think are the people in general for a multi-hazard situation?
Yeah, so we have to talk about at this stage what is the current structure for disaster management, and most of the countries today, one of the achievement of these international frameworks for disaster risk reduction, which I talked about, Sendai framework. But before Sendai framework, there was something called Hyogo framework for action that was from 2005 to 2015. And these frameworks basically gave a lot of realization to countries that every country needs a dedicated government organization to deal with disaster management. And many countries then established either National Disaster Management Authority or disaster management ministries. There are in many countries. Some countries have NDMO, National Disaster Management Office. So some are other name, but every country today have a dedicated government agency to deal with disaster management, and that's disaster governance part. And frameworks like Sendai framework, they provide guidance to this particular disaster management organization, and these disaster management organizations also deal with the down structure like states or provinces and all that. Seventh global target of Sendai framework. There are 7 global targets, A, B, C, D, E, F. That's what they say. So 7th target is about multi-hazard risk assessment. So enough awareness has been created because these frameworks are not top to bottom approach. It is not something that experts have sat in the room and then they advocated these 2 countries. No, it was a consultation from all the countries. So countries were asked, national governments were asked to consult with state and districts and collect their requirements, assimilate it, churn it like in Sanskrit we call samudra manthan, kind of churning of information, churn the ocean to find something. So that requirement from countries was then discussed on the regional platforms. For Asia Pacific, it was in Bangkok mostly, or any Asian countries in the regional platform for disaster risk reduction. Likewise, it happened in Africa, Latin America, Western Asia, everywhere. Those requirements are then came together, and that becomes Sendai framework for disaster risk reduction. And the 7th global target is every country should have multi-hazard risk assessment. So countries use this information to prepare their disaster management strategies. So every country today has the strategy that talks about creating multi-hazard risk assessment profiles and disaster management information system. So more or less, many countries are now building that kind of information from the past until now and understanding multi-hazard risk assessment and multi-hazard early warning systems as well. But what is the flip side of it? Although it is all there, development has its own pace. I come from Maharashtra, Sangli district, but there is another town near my district that is called Kolhapur. Have you heard of this? Kolhapur faced tremendous floods past like in 2019 and 21. But before that, if you remember, the floods happened only 15 years ago. Now, why this is happening? Because people are constructing in the river banks. They are reclaiming the areas of different streams that meet the rivers, and they are constructing highways. And highways, they are raising the land for constructing highways, and that's also accumulating water in the agricultural fields. So all the disaster that is happening in that city, which makes people lose millions of their wealth and a lot of loss of life, is not because a real hazard. It is the ill planning and ill development, or development that is not resilient. So they are not seeing multi-hazards situation, the risk they are living with, but they're creating the new risks. Sendai framework talks about not creating the new risks. Actually, you should prevent creation of new risk as you develop. So, there is lack of like translating that information from national, state to municipal level, where the towns and cities are built, and getting them into the areas of understanding this multi-hazard approach, so that development is resilient. And that is the reason we still experience what happened in Chennai, just happening today, probably still under flood. It's a result of lack of better understanding at local level. So there is much need to be done, and there is a lot we can contribute as a space community in that. Yeah, there's always positive side to it, what we are doing, a lot of good things, but there's always flip side.
Yeah, that's always there. And since I also have one more question, but in between, does any of the participants have any questions that they would like to share? Like, please raise your hand and please turn on
There's
your
something I
camera.
see already
I'm
in the chat.
sorry. Oh,
In the
yeah.
chat.
So, Jay Kumar, would you like to turn on your camera and ask the question directly to Dr. Shirish? We would really appreciate if you could do that because the session is interactive. So, okay, I understand. So I will read out his question. He's
Okay,
driving
so
and
there is another question by Jim.
yeah, Jim is
You would
also
like
there.
to say something, Jim, or I can reply what you have mentioned there, please.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to ask questions, which some of you might know I always have. After an inspirational talk like that, you trigger a lot of thinking and trying to understand the global picture a little bit better. I have a question. I hope it's not too challenging. As we all know, there in the developments in the space world, companies like Planet, there's a lot of development of new space providing new data, both in the optical but also in radar. There's a lot of promise in the next couple of years that global constellations are going to provide rapidly recurring data, which I think is an ideal source for the activities that you have described. My question comes down to that, of course, these activities are commercial. So these companies, they've invested a lot of money and they want to try to recuperate their money by selling their data, which is, of course, it's not obvious that for when there's a disaster that governments are able to pay the amount of money maybe that these companies are asking for. I know some companies have also subscribed to the charter and give that data away for free. I would just like to give you an open question. Can you describe this world, let's say, a little bit better, and maybe can you shed light on what seems to be a very fundamental problem, that the companies that have the biggest amount of data are driven by commercial rationale, and how willing are these companies to provide that data for, let's say, good purposes, and what can the UN do, or what can we as young people do to try to make a little bit a difference there, that these companies have more of a social responsibility in a way to help even more than maybe they're currently doing. So just about this whole topic, could you maybe dive into that a little bit, because there seems to be this very big problem, let's say. I don't know the right word to use, but it's not totally in line, their commercial interests with trying to do positive things for the world and ultimately saving lives. Thank you.
Great. I mean, this is really quite a thought-provoking question, and also important to discuss. Yes, as you said, that space is changing a lot. It was mainly a government affairs decades ago, and it's now taken over by private, right from space tourism to fleets of satellites, Earth observation satellites owned by them, and also revolution is also coming in navigation satellite system. Also, a lot of private companies are venturing into to improve the navigation system. So lots happening. I was recently a month back. I was in United States. That was geointelligence conference, basically geointelligence forum, where I visited booths of all these planet and lots of other private companies which we never heard before, and now they say, "Oh, we have lots of satellites and we can just customize it and launch to anyone." But along with that, a lot of positive things come. One thing you already pointed out, that there are some companies like Maxar or Planet, they are already part of international charter space and major disaster. And this data is available free of cost to all the countries in the world when disaster hits. So they get before disaster and after disaster, and there is a complete chain of how that data is utilized to immediately produce the maps for disaster management and all that. So as a part of social responsibility, more and more private companies are contributing to those kind of initiatives. As a United Nations arm for dealing with space governance, a lot of companies are also having bilateral agreement with us. So they say, okay, if disaster happens, or even some of the MOUs go beyond the disaster, even for developing the solutions for resilience. They say, okay, we can provide you this much amount of data for if we have viable project proposal from some countries, we can give such and such data. Of course, they have to have their commercial interest because they are investing into it, but they would also like to see that, okay, one part is social responsibility, another part is they would also like to demonstrate potential of their data. Their data is used, and there are the cases that are helping in development, in saving lives. So they also would like to demonstrate value of their data, and that value comes only when that data is clearly utilized by some countries, and then they have the use case stories. So we are just taking benefit of that. So commercial interest will remain there, but data is becoming available to more and more people. And then what NASA has done, or what Sentinel systems in European Union's Sentinel system, what they have done through the Copernicus, is all data has been made open. So instead of selling data, they realize that the data can fetch much more economic returns if it is made freely available for developmental purpose, rather than selling the data and getting some revenue. So now private companies cannot simply make it because they are not using taxpayers' money to free that data. But what I have seen is there are a lot of those companies are now developing a new model as a service. Basically, you just get an access for that data for a certain time where you can use it, develop the products. So everything is, because now there's cloud-based technologies and all these current technologies, they're letting you do. So for the user, it won't be super expensive like previously you have to order data, you have to get the entire scene. Maxa was before called GUI or whatever it is, Digital Globe. One scene would cost $3,000. I used to work in Afghanistan for monitoring opium cultivation, and one scene I used to purchase for $3,000, and I had to cover entire Afghanistan. So $500,000 I used to reserve for only monitoring opium in Afghanistan. Probably things are happening that now I would just say, okay, I would like to rent the satellite data for this time window and this time window for this area. I will do my work in 1 month and let data be yours. I don't need that raw data. I just derive my products and it will be super cheaper. And this is what now things are happening more of a renting service. And I think with private companies venturing into this area, I think these services will become more and more cheaper than they are expensive before. That is what because private companies really want millions, like it's like Uber or whatever it is. It's just to give a simple example, it's not that somebody should invest in a huge way. Just have one vehicle contribute to the shared economy kind of thing. So this shared economy concept is more and more coming, and a lot of companies, when I was visiting those exhibits, they were talking about this kind of concept. So I hope things will go in positive direction, and more countries which don't have even the access of satellite, their own satellite today, they probably never need their own satellite. They can just simply get the services, because now private companies, not only in US or Europe, but even in different part of world, private companies are now coming forward to get into this particular areas. So I hope this addresses, and probably you know a lot of these things already. From your question, I can already understand that you know so much about this area. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim, for that amazing question. It was really interesting, and also for that insightful answer that you have given, Dr. Shirish. So right now I'll read out Jayakumar's question as he is driving. So the question is, can you please advise me how to access Landsat data and where I can formally request the Landsat access information? That's a
Yeah.
question. Yeah.
So in the chat, I'm just putting some the web address. It's UN Spider knowledge portal, we call un-spider.org. If you go to knowledge portal and you just create click on the resources, and you will get links to access not only Landsat data but all the free open source satellite images from different organizations, NASA, NOAA, European Space Agency, whatever it is, and also other GIS data, global data sets, digital elevation model. So there's a huge compilation of all the open source data source at one place, unspider.org. And from there, once you get into their website, definitely there are ways. Actually, you just a little bit dig it into it, and you can actually place an order for open source data. And I think Copernicus is such a successful Landsat, and Copernicus people are using it in a huge way. Not a lot of researchers are now buying the data with Copernicus and Landsat. People are simply downloading that data of past couple of days or something, and then they're using it for their purpose. So please go to knowledge portal and you will find huge access to all those resources. Also the software, open source softwares like Quantum GIS and all that, those sources also there. Yeah.
Are there any other questions from the audience? Please feel free to interact with him. This is like a once in a lifetime opportunity, everyone. So, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay,
recommended practices. So Jim, yes, we have a lot of recommended practices where people can access our documents, and click by click methodologies given to assess droughts, floods, volcanoes, cyclones, and there's so many methodologies developed by different people. Yeah, you simply can access those. Yes. Sorry, so Alina, back to you.
Yeah, I mean, I had another question that I would like to raise, just in case, like if anyone has to like wants to answer that question, give a question. Sorry, please feel free to raise. I can go later also. Okay, I don't see a raised hand. So another question that I wanted to raise was like when it comes to the law and policy perspective. So like here we have like Hyogo framework for action, which came in 2000, like which was in action in 2005 to 2015, and then the Sendai framework came in like from 2015 to 2030. And over this time, the technology and the different kinds of space-based assets that are used for disaster risk management has been evolving, and now let's say like we have a better version of all these technologies right now than what we had in 2005, right? So my question will be like in 20 after 2030, like once the time for the Sendai framework is over, what kind of like new type of technologies should be evolved, and how it can be implemented in a better way, like from a policy perspective, like how it can be implemented in places like for example Asia Pacific, to be exact, where there is a large defragmentation between the technology and the policy itself. Like what is your take on that?
Okay, so if you look at this, you referred Hyogo framework for action that was from 2005 to 2010, and then 2015 onwards to 2030 we have Sendai framework. Similarly, the other main framework, which is a real main framework basically to which Hyogo framework or Sendai framework feeds into, is a sustainable development goals, 2030 agenda for sustainable development, again 2015 2030. So before that 10 years, what was there? Millennium Development Goals. 2005 to 10 was Millennium Development Goals. So I would like to just look little comprehensive into it. What is the difference happening 10 years before 2015, and then all these frameworks that came into existence in 2015, there is something very significant. In terms of Millennium Development Goal, it was more donor driven. It was more oriented towards helping developing countries. It was the framework that was designed in the closed rooms by experts, and then given to the world. What happened in 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development is entire requirement came from churning through the communities, states, countries, regions, and then it becomes a 2030 Agenda or Sustainable Development Goals. And so it is not done in the boardroom, but it is from people basically. And that's the reason it's not donor driven. It's more through participation based. And Millennium Development Goals, we saw only they were known to poor countries. But Sustainable Development Goals, you go to all rich countries, Sweden, Norway, or even in Austria, in Vienna, when I go to the mall here, there's a famous mall called Donau Zentrum. I see big banners of Sustainable Development Goals. Millennium Development Goal was a taboo for developed countries. They say it is only for poor countries. But Sustainable Development Goals, even the richest country is saying, oh, I would like to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. So whole perception has been changed and participation has come from every perspective. Similar thing happened with Hyogo Framework and Sendai Framework. Hyogo Framework was also managing disaster and sort of things. But what happened at the end of Hyogo Framework, when the review was done, lesson learned, we realized that the risks are generated much more than they are reduced at the end of Hyogo Framework. And therefore, Sendai Framework got that lesson and they say, so it's not about managing risk, disasters, but it's about managing risks and building resilience and build back better. So these new elements came into Sendai Framework. And not only Sendai Framework, but many other frameworks like that, all that finally, they're like a small streams get into ocean. So ocean is a sustainable development goal. That's where it gone. And now countries have their planning mechanism. In India, we call it Niti Aayog. In many countries, they have planning commission. They do their 5 years, 10 years planning document for countries' development overall, and upon top of which the government functions. On those documents, that they are considering sustainable development goals, which also absorbs the elements of all other frameworks like Sendai Framework, and then the government does the planning. So planning is very cohesive, uniform, integrated nowadays. Just to give a very quick example, doubling farmer income is India's strategy, because I know most of you are from India. Now I'm giving this example. And zero hunger is a sustainable development goal. That also talks of doubling income of small farmers. And now we have 14 volumes, 150 page each. So you imagine an encyclopedia of the strategy that deals with doubling the farmers' income, Government of India strategy. So this is how you see the correlation of how these frameworks and how the governments are pitching into it and taking advantage of this particular knowledge. Now, during this pandemic, one thing happened which is good, that is we have seen the big surge in use of technology. We never talked about the frontier technologies, or what World Economic Forum refers to. It's called fourth industrial era technology. That's what they call 4IR technologies. Basically all this cloud computing, artificial intelligence, machine learning, big data, drone, 3D printing, Internet of Things, and all these things we never knew before. But now, simply keeping mobile in hand, I can say that I'm using cloud, I'm using big data, I'm using machine learning, I'm using all earth observation for my navigation or weather reports and everything. So simply one mobile tells me that I'm user of all these technologies. I don't know what's happening at the back end. There are a lot of servers performing analysis, but I am a great user of Internet of Things as well. This itself is Internet of Things now in my hand. Today we have Wi-Fi bulbs also. You make millions of colors of your bulbs just by controlling your mobile phone. That's also Internet of Things. This was never a realization before. Even when Sendai Framework or this Millennium Sustainable Development Goal came into existence in 2015, we never thought this so much. Although it says it has established the mechanism for science and technology cooperation, which was never before. There is a great deal of now attention is given by United Nations countries. So we have something called Science and Technology Forums, STI forums, for achieving sustainable development goals. But with this fourth industrial revolution technologies, by 2030, whatever we achieve or we don't achieve, I know that a lot of the goals are suffered now. We will not be able to achieve what it was thought, all the zero hunger or whatever climate action, all of it. But of course, there will be some advancement, and but by 2030, we should be totally geared up how benefits of this technology can be taken in basically making this world more resilient, more sustainable, more green, so that, and there's also big realization because of advances in space that everyone has realized that this is the only home we have so far. Although we are venturing so much deep into space, we still don't find anything. And I don't think we would like to stay in some kind of dome on the Mars. So I think there will be more realization that all these technologies need to be put to proper use, and by 2030 or next framework that come probably will become more technology oriented and more like green technologies. That's the trend we see. And positive part is that space is everywhere there. There's something called, I would like to conclude this discussion with one thing, that there is something called UN Common Agenda. That's quite another significant thing. The Common Agenda have 12 key areas identified, and one of the 12 area, which never happened in its history, one of the 12 area is long-term sustenance of outer space. So outer space was never part of UN documents before, but now one of the key area of UN Common Agenda, upon which next frameworks will be based, considers space as an important element. So there's a bright future for space now. So you're in right field. So there is something from Rene, perspective, vision, user party. I think I already mentioned this. As the question has been typed there, I was already answering it without reading it. So thank you, Rene, for your question. I think I addressed it well. So
Any other questions or comments that anyone have to raise? Okay. Jim, your hand is raised. Okay, yeah, Jim, go ahead.
Yeah, if you allow me, I will give an opportunity to Dr. Shirish to mention something more specific about UN Spider. I'm aware that UN Spider actually has two offices, one in Bonn and one in Beijing. And maybe you could, if you would like to, describe a little bit the different roles of the two offices, maybe the activities or the responsibilities, just to see how the kind of division between the two offices is done. I mean, it's a quite in-detailed question. I would be very interested. I'm not sure if it's for everybody interesting, but maybe it allows you to really describe a little bit the work that UN Spider is doing. Thank you.
Yeah, so the UN Spider motto is basically, we know that there are disaster management communities in countries and there are space communities, providers of space-based information, and those communities are never connected with each other. I have examples that in some of the countries, disaster management agency and remote sensing agency are across the street. In 20 years, they see each other's buildings, but they never gone to each other. I know this, and this is also happening in some of the states in India. The state remote sensing center, state disaster management authority, they have offices across, and they only know each other when they sit in my program, in UN Spider program. Oh, you're next door, we should use your services. And then remote sensing person says, oh, I have a lot of information on disaster management, you should use it, but they never used it. This is what UN Spider is, basically connecting the providers of information and users. On one side, you have technological savvy persons. On the other side, you have people who daily deal with the routine things, not technological savvy, and they keep changing in the government. The scientific and provider community remains same, but the government disaster management people, this keep changing every 2-3 years. Today they are disaster management officer, tomorrow they are district collector, a third day they are income tax officer. So you have to keep connecting them all the time. This is what UN Spider does. Our headquarters is in Vienna. Right now I'm in Vienna, but I also head office in Beijing, which is meant for capturing the needs of Asia and Pacific. Whereas Bonn office has a responsibility of managing our knowledge portal, which I have given the website un-spider.org. That's the primary responsibility of Bonn office. But they also have responsibility of working for Africa, because That office is heavily funded by now Europe, especially Germany, and priority of Europe is to enable Africa so that a lot of migrants don't come here. So a lot of emphasis goes on advising the African countries and building their capacity for use of space technology in disaster management. Of course, they also look for Latin America. Together in Vienna and Bonn, we also support Latin America region. And I primarily look after through Beijing office, Asia and Pacific. Activities go right from technical advisory missions to the countries at very high level, right from ministerial level or chief of the organizations, to building skills and capacity of working level staff in utilizing and generating knowledge, and a lot of outreach programs. We have a number of conferences. The next conference is on 16th November, 16th, 18th. That's the Bonn conference. Although it is focused more on Africa, any other persons from any region are free to join and listen what's happening, because there are a lot of common factors. Disasters are same everywhere, and through these conferences we bring the communities together. And lately then, as you saw my last two slides, we are also in supporting pandemic, and we are also generating knowledge for threats coming from near earth objects. So these are some of our extensions, basically cross-sectional things that we do. So that's all about UN Spider, and that's how we work from our different offices. So thank you, Jim, for asking this question.
Any other questions from the audience? Even the organizers, if you have any questions.
Yeah, I have a question, Arina.
Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. I've been enjoying the session, Dr. Shirish, and you mentioned about near-Earth objects, and I was wondering about space debris and if there are specific programs right now by the UN to tackle that, especially knowing the increased way in which we are using space to tackle issues on Earth. Maintaining the sustainability of outer space becomes very, very important, and space debris, I think, might become an issue. So I wanted to know your perspective on that.
Yeah, so one thing I could not tell you in detail, that our office has something called Committee for Peaceful Uses of Outer Space. This happens in Vienna, where all the space-faring countries, space emerging countries, and many observer organizations, the organizations that are observers, they are intergovernmental organizations or they are international NGOs, they come to Vienna to participate into our Committee for Peaceful Uses of Outer Space, COPUS. That's how we call it, COPUS. And if you have learned about something about space treaties and moon treaties and all that, these are all outcomes. Or if you heard from me about International Charter Space and Major Disaster, these are all outcomes of this particular Committee for Peaceful Uses of Outer Space. And this committee also has one agenda. Every year it is discussed for 10 days. This community happens for 10 days in Vienna, normally in the month of June. And one of the agenda is space debris. So we have a working group for dealing with the space debris, and through that particular working group, countries like Japan, China, India, and all these top space-faring countries, United States, European Space Agencies, they take a lead in discussing how these space debris need to be taken care, how and what all as a responsibility, which missions some countries can launch, and how technologies can be developed. So although work is to be done by the countries that have technology, as a UN, we are providing them agenda and platform for this, and also some kind of there's another very significant agenda that goes across all the 10 days. That is called long-term sustenance of outer space, and detailed document is being developed through very heavy consultation with all the space agencies. Every day in these 10 days, there are 2 to 3 hours are spent on discussing a long-term sustenance of outer space, which also considers space debris as one of its aspects for sustenance, because we today depend a lot on space, as I mentioned. And so there a lot of detailed guidelines are coming, which are contributed by the space agencies itself, government itself. So it may not be binding, but since it is all coming from space-faring countries and space emerging countries, it's their say, and it is their responsibility if they make a new launches, how they can take how they can bring that satellite basically back to Earth or burn it in the atmosphere, or some kind of thing needs to be also put there. And we also maintain register of objects. Every country reports us how many space objects launched every time. So we have the formal register of space objects, and through that, of course, we collect information of what is their plan for keeping space clean. So there's a lot happening in this particular area at this level, which is now translating, because now people realize that if they launch an object, it might be under risk if they are not taking care of space debris. So you launch multi-million-dollar mission and then it just hits by some space debris and it will go off. So they are also worried. So that's why this particular international cooperation happening in this area, and soon you will see some kind of good results and guidelines that countries will follow. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much.
So I have a last question, but if the participant has to have any more questions, just go ahead. We might as well be soon closing in on the session, on the webinar, but the workshop participants, please stay back. We will be giving some details about how this is exactly going to work for the next couple of weeks. So yeah, please stay back, don't leave. Do you have, I don't see any hands raised, so maybe I'll go ahead and ask the final question. So Dr. Shirish, I just wanted to know, from what you explained, you have observed from Vienna, you have observed from Beijing office. So is there any difference, or is there anything that is lacking specifically in the Asia Pacific region in terms of technology, in terms of implementation, in terms of awareness, in terms of community, anything it could be? Do you see any specific part that we as a community can actually, bring a change, make some impact? Yeah, that would be my question. Thank you.
Okay, so yeah, Asia Pacific region is very unique and full of challenges compared to many other. Since we are talking of disasters, you can see that at least 75% disasters of the world happen in Asia, and 80% of victims, people died, are also in Asia. People might think that, oh, Africa is much more challenging. Yes, Africa is challenging in terms of poverty and hunger and other aspects, but in terms of disasters, Asia Pacific is the region. Also, impact of climate change will be felt more intensely in Asia Pacific. So these are some unique things. And unique thing on positive side is Asia Pacific is also a region that is much vibrant in technologies. The way technologies are developed and accepted and used in daily life, I think Asia Pacific is much more technological savvy than even Europe, I would say. So these are some of the unique characteristics of the region. But if you look into space related aspects, Europe has unified approach of European Space Agency, taking contribution from all and launching the missions and offering the complete program, space programs for entire benefit of entire Europe. We have Sentinel Asia, which is catering only disaster management part, and APRSAP is a kind of forum that also brings people together. But if you look at number of countries that really are into space, you can just count China, India, Japan as the top powers, and okay, to some extent now Thailand is contributing. Vietnam have their 1 or 2 satellites now. Indonesia is quite good. And then that's all. The other countries are yet to really step into these areas. They're trying now. So there is a huge, and how many countries you are talking of? You are talking of something like 65 to 70 countries now that wants to come in this area, and they need knowledge on space technology, space policy, and capacity. And also Pacific region, all these small islands, and they are so small. They don't have a big economy, and they are also quite isolated. And you want to bring one participant from Fiji or Samoa somewhere to our conferences, I spent $6,000. Whereas I bring someone from Asia, I spend 600 to 10 times expensive. So, those remote islands. So these are the challenges that one has to see while building your programs. But you can leverage on the fact that Asia Pacific is a region that is technologically very advanced, and rate of development is much faster than any other region. And that is the advantage, and taking advantage of that and the huge gap that exists between the countries that are spacefaring and that are emerging, or that are not yet into space is huge. There's a huge lot of gray area where one can really build programs basically to help the countries to make landscapes equal, or take those who are, so that no one lags behind, which is our motto with sustainable development goals. Make sure that no one lags behind. I'm happy when I have a good neighbor, I have a rich neighbor, prosperous neighbor. I'm not happy someone staying in poverty. That also brings bad thing for my own community. So same true for our region, that we should make sure that knowledge reaches to everyone and use it for their resilience and building prosperity in all the countries. That way region becomes better and world will remain better. And that is how you can look at the way you can go ahead through your program as well. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Shirish, and it was great. It was an inspiring answer, I would say. And over to you, Alina. If the participants does not have any questions, we can wind up the webinar as such. Yeah, over to you.
So that was very interesting to hear some of the questions and Dr. Shirish's answers as well. Before winding up, I would like to ask or request everyone to turn on their videos so that we can take a picture, if it's all right. Can everyone please turn on their videos and pose for a picture? Okay.
Yes, gallery view. Yeah. Yeah, feel free to switch it on or keep it off. That's okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Right.
Thank
So
you.
with that, I would like to conclude today's session, and thank you, Dr. Shirish, for joining us today and supporting us. Yeah, supporting us. I mean, you are the first person who actually said yes, that you can deliver the lecture for our workshop webinar series. So thank you for supporting us, and hopefully we will be able to reach to the expectations that all you people have for us. So hopefully the workshop will be a good success as well. Thank you so much for joining us today, and thank you for giving us all these amazing insights that you have. Thank you for joining us, Dr. Shirish. And thank you, Jovita, for giving us the logo for Cosmic Sandbox and for joining us for this session today. Hopefully, we will collaborate more in future as well. Yep.
That was a great logo.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. Yeah.
So thank you, everyone, and all the best for your future journey. Bye-bye.
Thank you.